good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that you're doing well and having an awesome day. I know that you all are looking for Dr. Timothy O'Brown. Unfortunately, you have with me tonight Jason T. Mahoney, the motivator. I'm a consultant for the National Optometric Foundation, and I am here in the place of Dr. Timothy O'Brown. So if you all want to send Dr. Brown some hellos, we miss you, put that in the comment box. But we're super excited to be here on the live with the National Optometric Foundation as we talk about Black History Month and optometry in Black history. Can I say that there's so much history in the Optometric Association, Optometric Foundation, as it relates to Black history. And I'm super honored to be in the place today and represent Dr. Timothy O'Brown. But before we get started, if you all can do me a few things. First, if you can like this video and if you can share it. Again, like it and share it. And if you're looking at us on YouTube, please like the video, and you can also copy the link and share with your family and friends. Also, if you have any questions as the session is going on tonight, please feel free to key those questions in the comment box. Also, if you're learning something new, key that information in, give our guest presenter tonight undivided attention, and let us know that you're out there. Again, things that I would like for y'all to do for me. Please make sure to visit our website, www.nationaloptometricfoundation.com, to learn a little bit more about the National Optometric Foundation. Also, if you're interested in donating any funds to support the scholarships for the National Optometric Foundation or any of the work that they're doing in the community, please feel free to make a donation at the website, or you can make a donation at the Cash App at $Protecting the Vision. Again, that is $Protecting the Vision. And as Dr. Brown would say, if he were here today, he would tell you, as far as an eye exam, don't delay, do it today. So please go out and get those eye exams. So I'm super excited that we have a phenomenal guest speaker with us tonight, who I have the opportunity to know going on a year, and I feel honored and privileged to be able to know this amazing good brother. He is the one and only Dr. E. Larry Jones, and he is the president of the National Optometric Association. Can somebody write in the comment box, National Optometric Association? He is the president for national, not local, national. So this is a history maker that we have with us tonight. Well, let me give you a little bit about Dr. Larry Jones. Dr. Jones attended the University of Washington, Seattle from 1975 through 1981. He received a Bachelor of Arts degree in Black History Ethnic Studies with a minor in anthropology. So again, do you see why we have Dr. Jones tonight to talk about Black history? He taught Black history with his father. Dr. Jones, an author and distinguished professor. He played football for the University of Washington Huskies. Okay, I just learned that about Dr. Jones, that he was a football player. Okay. He received his Bachelor of Science and Doctor of Optometry degree from Pacific University College of Optometry in 1985. He was a Washington State Board certified in 1992 as hearing instrument specialist. Professional memberships include the National Optometric Association for 40 years. I want to take a pause there. Dr. Jones has been a member of the National Optometric Association for 40 years. That speaks wisdom. He's also served on the AOH Hall of Fame and the AOA, AOSA, and also Grants Committee, the Optometric Physicians of Washington, as a participant on the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Access Task Force, and committee member of the Pacific DEI Task Force. Again, I had the opportunity to work with Dr. Jones on various projects, but I think I have the opportunity to call him friend. And it is an awesome opportunity to know this awesome guy. So Dr. Jones, if you can come out the back studio for us, please.
Hi there.
How you doing, Dr. Jones?
Doing well, thank you.
Good. So I did not know you were an all-star football player.
I was, and I was a backup football player.
Okay. But you played. So guess what? If you did something good in one game, you're considered a star. Okay.
Thank you.
So you are an all-star. Okay. Yeah. If you made one touchdown, that was a star moment. So you are an all-star football player. Well, so super excited to have you here with us tonight on the National Optometric Foundation. live webinar where we provide information, resources, accesses, and things to those individuals that are listening audience to just learn a little bit more about optometry and the importance of eye health and just caring for your health holistically. So I know you have a lot of good information for us tonight because you are our wisdom giver. So, but I want to ask you a question before we get started, Dr. Jones. What does Black history mean to you in this very moment?
So, I mean, that would take me probably an hour just to answer that specific question. But Black history is important not only for people of color to know what happened in the past can also happen again in the future. History repeats itself. We know that. So what's important about Black history, I think, is for others to learn the struggles that also are happening even at this moment. So just as you spoke, Black history was happening. So we will look back on all of the things that we're doing right now as a historic event, a first time thing. Mm-hmm. The National Optometric Association stood out and stood up for themselves because we didn't have a voice for ourselves. Mm-hmm. So history brings that voice back of those past shoulders that we stand on. Mm. So the historic things that come to pass, again, have been worked for. We have to give that honor. Mm. And that's where we come from right now is giving that honor, educating each other so we're not afraid of each other. Because if you don't know each other, you fear each other. Martin Luther King said that. So we want to make sure that we know who we are and that we don't fear each other and that we understand where we came from and where we're going.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And so one thing that you said that was profound when you talked about that we must know each other. And so many times I think about when I grew up, we were a community. And now as an adult, we don't really see that community anymore. And it's so important that we get back to that landmark of being that community. Yes. So I know you have a lot of information for us tonight. So I'm going to go in the back and then I'm just going to sit back and learn and listen and learn from the wisdom that you're going to give. So you have the platform to lead us to higher heights. And thank you for the work. Thank you for the work that you're doing in being a trailblazer for young Black men such as myself. So thank you.
Bless you. Thank you. Okay, just to start out, I have no disclosures. Except some of the books that I will be showing you are books from our family. So that's the only disclosure technically. So I'm not sure if that creates a disclosure issue or not, but I just said no disclosures because not trying to sell them, just trying to teach with it. So if we can move on to the next slide. So in 2003, the Genome Project kind of changed how Black historians can talk about Black history because it 100% confirmed that Africa is for sure 100% the origin of all humans. I was an anthropology major also in school, and in the 70s, our anthropology teacher taught that Europe was actually the home of the European white Americans, or in the Caucasus Mountain, the Caucasian Americans. And so this actually blows that right out of the water. And Craig Venter, who in 2003 said race is a social concept, not a scientific one. We all evolved in the last 100,000 years from the same small tribes that migrated out of Africa. And I added, therefore, we are all Africans. Craig Venter pioneered the use of automated gene sequencers, and in 1990 developed the express sequence tags, which a new strategy that created a discovery that tagged the genes and revolutionized the biological sciences. So basically, he figured out a way to see where everyone's from, localized as well as Africa. We now know when we look at our past, Senator Kennedy said something, Robert Kennedy said, what if we go to heaven and we, all of our lives, have treated the Negro as inferior, and God is there, and we look up and he's not white. He said that in South Africa when he was meeting with Nelson Mandela. Please move to the next slide. So if you look at this, you can actually see how the migration of people started in the middle of Africa, moved up. We have now the data for the first diaspora, where we know from about 8,500 to 2,000 years ago, and that's a magic number for some of us who understand what happened 2,000 years ago. Early hunter-gatherers in Spain and Luxembourg had darker skin, and many of them lacked two genes. And these genes are the important ones, SLC45A2. So that gene, if you look it up and see what it does, it leads to depigmentation. And there are two other genes that actually lead to blue eyes and lighter skin, but that's the main gene that kind of natural selection took over, and darker skinned people couldn't survive in the cold, cloudy north, caves and stuff. So as we as Africans, we all as Africans moved into the northern territories, the clouds, the colder weather created a problem, and the vitamin D wasn't passed through with the sunlight through our skin. So the UV absorption actually produced the Europeans of today. And so when we look to see kind of what happened, natural selection favored two genetic solutions, evolving pale skin from dark skin that absorbs more UV efficiently, and favoring lactose tolerant people. So that was another thing, had a vitamin D deficiency. So dark skinned people that don't get sun can be vitamin D deficient. And this is a health issue for us as people of color that live in the northern latitudes, that if you're not getting enough sun, if you're staying indoors, you need vitamin D, because it can be linked to prostate cancer, diabetes, high blood pressure, and cardiovascular and bone disease. So getting enough vitamin D is super important. That's what happened to the Africans that slowly died off, and their skin got lighter and lighter over time. Move to the next slide, please. Our African presence shows up, first of all, as we look at the migrations. The oldest migration of people that are still around are the Aborigines, over 50,000 years ago. And a really interesting thing, if you have any Filipino friends or people that you know that are from the Philippines, ask them about the Aita people, A-E-T-A, Aita. They are still there, and they're still there in their purest form. When they're a little bit shorter Africans, they live in the mountains, and they'll say, oh yeah, the black people that live in the mountains, the original Filipinos. And so they know. We don't know this because we were never taught that. But if you look at the second slide, you'll see the young girl standing there. And that was one of the only slides I could get that I could find that was a free slide for me that was available. And so then we look at the Olmec tribe from Mexico. In slide 3, you'll see down at the lower left where the Olmecs came in Central America. There's many statues to see what they look like. And then the Fijians, I had the like a blessing to be able to go to the Fiji Islands, and I saw many of the phenotypes, which is the outward the look of the genotype, that look just like friends of mine here in Washington. So I was like, the Fijians don't look like Samoans, they don't look like Tongans, Hawaiians. They have their own look, and they're the original people that took the boats there. And if you look at the migration to America, according to the American historian and linguist Leo Weiner of Harvard University, one of the strongest pieces of evidence to support the fact that Africans sailed to America before Christopher Columbus was a journal entry from Columbus himself. He said when he got to and talked with the Native Americans and signed with them, They confirmed that black-skinned people had come from the southeast in boats trading gold-tipped spears, and the ratio of the gold-tipped spears that they examined had the same properties that were being forged in Guinea, Africa. So we know that Africans have been all over the world long time before Columbus. This is something that is a very common thing that is now understood. So as we move on, our next slide, please. The 18th dynasty, we're going to move way back into history and start out with the 18th dynasty. Tutankhamon and Cleopatra, when I was growing up, I saw her as Elizabeth Taylor. So I thought that most Egyptians were very light-skinned. And if you look at the right side of this picture, where you see Akhenaten and Smenkhare, the father and brother of Tutankhamun, look at their profiles, look at their lips, look at their noses. This is how we distinguish, how we identify people of color. And so when we move on to the next slide, most of the African heroes from the past, Hercules, who was actually a real person that they deified or called a god after he died, was the last person to conquer the Amazon women, which were actually a real group of women that conquered the world. They were African women that migrated from Libya, from the Libyan mountains, all over the world, conquered the world. And the ninth labor of Hercules was his last battle of Hippolyte. And he took her belt, and actually that was a proof that he had conquered her. So that was when patriarchy actually took over from matriarchy for the last time. So the world was in a matriarchy. Black women actually ruled the world before black men. In this case, the warring was back and forth. We move to Queen Hatshepsut, who's the second one. You'll see her in a pharaoh's, honorable pharaoh's outfit in stone. And Queen Hatshepsut is actually the one who bailed Moses out of the Nile, supposedly. So you can look that up. That's a very interesting piece of history there, where you can find that Moses came. His mom was basically Queen Hatshepsut, who built a whole beautiful. If you look at some of the things that she built the obelisks. Her architect was one of the greatest architects of all time. So a lot of the things like you see at Washington, D.C., the obelisk, you see a lot of the things that were built, they actually created them during her reign. Nectanebos, who was a pharaoh, was actually Alexander the Great's father. And that, if you go through history to look and see kind of how that came out, that's a very interesting roundabout also. If you look at the picture, you'll see Alexander the Great being honored underneath the bird in the picture on the third there. And if you look down below, you'll see Queen Cleopatra, again, who we see, on TV as a different, being created and culturally stolen. A lot of the things that happen, we need to understand that these are things that happen when you lose in a war. You lose your, the things that you have. So I'll talk about that later. Hannibal, who is an awesome general, who basically brought his elephants to Rome, and he didn't conquer Rome in the Punic Wars, but he basically, brought a big scare to them, but didn't conquer them completely. Emperor Severus, Septimius Severus of Rome, was known as an African emperor of Rome. If you look at look at his listing, Emperor Septimius Severus, he's one of the first emperors of Rome. Queen Charlotte was one of the first black queens of England before the queen that we have right now, or the princess that we have right now. We'll see the first one of the queens of England, Queen Charlotte. If you go back and look at her history, she came from the islands of Barbados, I think, was originally. Alexander Pushkin is a well-known poet, and most Russians understand that he is one of the greatest poets of all time. Again, if you have Russian friends, they know that Alexander Pushkin was a great African poet, and he helped revolutionize their language. Next slide, please. So the diaspora from the Americas to Spain around 1500, Portugal discovered Brazil in 1519. Cortez conquered Mexico. The slave trade started in 1526 in Brazil and 1619 in America. March 2nd, 1807, the Congress abolished the African slave trade, and then it took all the way till 1860 for the last illegal slave ship to be to abolish the slaves coming over. So we've looked at many, many different numbers. This African repository that you see to the right is a Christian written book, and we found in this, if you read on the second paragraph over, it says the slave trade, the European slave trade, the numbers are 180 million slaves died in the slave trade. So I've heard anywhere from 20 million to 50 million in the slave trade. This paper, which was back in the 1800s, was written by people that were at that time, had that available. The numbers were much greater than what they said. So 180 million was, I think, the population of the United States about 30 years ago. So that's a huge number compared to some of the other numbers that come out. The American Colonization Society was created in 1817 to send all free blacks that were already here, that we said that came in boats before Columbus, that were already here with the natives, Native American. That's why most black people that are in the United States are part Native American, because we came here way before Columbus and we were friends with the natives. And so the American Colonization Society got together all of the free blacks that were already here and tried to send them to Liberia and Sierra Leone. So those two countries were created to actually allow black people to recolonize back in Africa, which actually turned into a big mistake, because right now, and for the past probably 50 years, that has been they've had the lowest amount of United States medical aid than any other place in the world. So if you look at it, they, right now that, and we know where Ebola came from. We know where, a lot of this stuff is coming from. And I'm not a conspiracist, but I'm just saying there's a lot of interesting facts that are going out that we don't know about. There's 10 different terms for the degree of blackness. We know that was to divide people, and division, we know, creates a fall. So after 1900, the census was only grouped at Negro and white. So if we move on to the next page, President Abe Lincoln, we know he was killed. He freed the slaves January 1st, 1863. 2 years later, he was killed. And so we know, if we looked at Lincoln and his face, his colorations, we know he was a man of color also. We know everyone was a person of color originally, but some of us have a little more swarthiness, they called it, than they do now. But as we go through time, we can see, if you go to the next page, please, that after Lincoln freed the slaves, we were given 40 acres and a mule. The slaves were at that point, a picture of General William Tecumseh Sherman marched the slaves through and gave out land, about 800,000 homesteads to African Americans. The Senate Bill number 60, introduced January 5th, 1966, passed both of the houses. And then if you go to the next page, after Lincoln was killed, Andrew Johnson vetoed that Senate Bill 60, which took away the 40 acres and a mule back. And they had almost like a lemonade sell on the White House lawn, selling back the land to the plantation owners. And so they actually, that history repeated itself. Just recently, I found out, I was watching when Trump became first outgoing president, he refused to attend the inauguration, just as this guy, Andrew Johnson, who took over as president. So they kind of were very similar in a couple of ways. I don't want to say, too many ways, but anyway, moving on to the next slide. Oh, terrorism and the KKK. Okay. Among domestic violence extremists, it was said that the largest white supremacist extremists that will be the most persistent and lethal threat in the homeland in 2021 and in the future. And so we know there's over 1,000 hate groups. It's increased. We know who the Daughters of Confederacy are. If you haven't heard of them, please look them up. They are the ones that actually purged, filtered, and banned books in schools and are still working in the South in some areas. The libraries weren't aligned with the lost cause promoting white supremacy, and its poisonous effects on Black history still exist. So even in 2018, there was a Republican law or something put forth, a bill to stop certain books to come through. So there's been a big filtering of all of this information. So, and we know when the Capitol got attacked, that if that would have been people of color, it would have been a completely different scene. Please move to the next slide. So Red Summer and Black Wall Street. So Red Summer was a kind of a combination of things that happened in Washington, D.C. in 1919 in July, as well as in Chicago. And so the Chicago one, I think, was one of the worst ones. There was a swimming spot in Lake Michigan during the summer where only white people were supposed to swim. And what happened was a young man actually paddled into there, and he was hit with a rock and killed and drowned. And so that created a large uproar in the Black community, and across the nation. There was 25 riots that happened, and many people were killed. And then that was 1919. And then in May 31st, 1921, a young man, Dick Rowland, 19 years old, a young Black man, tripped in an elevator. He was going to the bathroom, got on an elevator, and he tripped into a girl, Sarah Page. She screamed and said that he attacked her. It started Black Wall Street, the Tulsa Massacre. So we know what happened there. More than 10,000 people were left homeless. Over 300 Black people were killed. They were bombed from above with dynamite and kerosene bombs from airplanes. So it was one of the first times that America bombed itself. And then the next time was Operation Move in Philly. But this is one of the most heinous criminal acts, and it's never been prosecuted or punished by the government at any level, municipal, county, or state or federal, which is really sad. So if we move on. So the NOA honored the late Dr. Anita Myrtle Williams Christopher with our Founders Award. If you look up into the right corner, you'll see the Williams family in a car. Sitting in the back seat is her dad. And so it's kind of neat. They owned a car repair. They owned I think the Dreamland Theater. All of that was destroyed in the Tulsa Massacre. And there were actually millionaires. Black people were millionaires at that time, and we were building that wealth, that's why they called it Black Wall Street. But so one of those things that we have to remember is that a lot of these people are still alive. I mean, my dad was born in 1922, and a lot of the people understand kind of what happened back in those times. But we're still honoring Dr. Williams Christopher, and she'll be honored again. We'll give out an award this year in Oklahoma for the Oklahoma chapter of NOA. So Tuskegee, we're going to move to the next slide. And this one, everyone pretty much knows about it. It was just shocking to me when I learned that penicillin, when they were experimenting with syphilis on Black people in 1932, penicillin 11 years later was actually discovered, and not till 1972 did the study stop. So 40 years, hundreds of men, along with their wives. Imagine this: you have syphilis in your family. I mean, it's just the most terrible thing. And we as optometrists know syphilis is the great imposter disease, where it can look like anything or come out with many, many different symptoms. So the government finally, I think it was Bill Clinton in 1997, said that he, admitted that he did something deeply, profoundly wrong and morally wrong. And it was an outrage to all of to Black people all over the world. And so The Medical Apartheid is a great book by Harriet Washington. If you can read that, that has so many different things that you can read about. I won't go too deep into all the other things that happened. But yeah, so many things that happened in our healthcare. As we move to the next slide. So over 145,000 people, and I think it's probably closer to 150. I didn't get a count more recently, but Martin Luther King said, of all the forms of inequity and injustice in healthcare, is the one in health is the most shocking. So of all the forms of inequity, injustice in health is one of the most shocking. So we know that Black people and Latinx are 2 to 3 times more at risk than whites and Asians. And we know that nearly half the Black-owned businesses have been wiped out from COVID. Blacks are reluctant to take the vaccine because of past medical travesties. And we know about, all of the other things basically that are that we look at and see. If you go to the next slide. Moving on to something a little more interesting, 1.2 million Black men served in the U.S. military during World War II, and they were often treated as second-class citizens. So a war on two fronts, their own civil rights, and the things that for segregation, and they fought the tyranny abroad in Japan and Europe. So many of the officers and people stayed and enlisted stayed in Europe because they were treated like rock stars, because they saved, they saved World War II. So we know the Tuskegee Airmen were the most talented pilots in World War II. They have an amazing record of escorting over 200 missions with bombers without losing a bomber. So we look at that front. I'm going to go to the next page, please. This is my father, Dr. Edward L. Jones, who was in World War II, and he actually did stay in. My mom had to go get him, I think, but he stayed in Europe because he felt like people were more, loving and caring and were more excited to have people of color there. So my dad he explained what happened when they bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He was sent to learn Japanese in 2 weeks. He spoke like 7 languages. He had a theater in Hollywood in the 50s with Harry Belafonte. They were the 2 only Blacks in Hollywood at that time with their own theater. I was in some plays with my dad also. He was the assistant dean of Black studies. They demoted him during the 60s after the civil rights movement. They demoted him. They never gave him tenure. He authored over 12 books and was one of the favorites of all the students. He had multiple degrees, and he actually got to speak at the UN with the African leaders. So very honorable. The next page, if we go to it, is my wife's father, Lieutenant Colonel David Thompson III, who was killed in Vietnam. He was a private pilot for the Vice President of the United States, Hubert Humphrey. So you see a picture here. My wife is the little girl standing there. She was 4 years old. He was killed that year in Vietnam in the Tet Offensive. If you know a little bit of history, a lot of people were killed in Vietnam in the Tet Offensive in 1968. Over 300,000 African Americans served in Vietnam. They lowered the standards to get more Black people in, and actually they fought and died because of that. They died at a higher rate because of there was a whole thing that's kind of deep to go into right now, but there was a Project 100,000. If you look at it, it's pretty interesting. We visited the Vietnam Wall multiple times, and so we really have a heart for our veterans. So moving on to the next page. So we move on to the 60s now. So the Jim Crow laws. I was, I think, probably 8, 9 years old, somewhere when they passed the Civil Rights Act. There was still a lot of treatment of people of color. If you moved into an area that wasn't really, that was integrated or having integration issues in the 60s, you would feel the racial pressure. And so the Voting Rights Act of 65 and the Fair Housing Act of 1968, which supposedly ended discrimination in renting and selling homes. I tried to buy a house in an area in Washington, and actually the neighbors bought the home right out from under Maxine and I. So this is still happening. We know people get rated differently if you're a person of color or not when someone's doing your appraisal on your home. So anyway, there's a lot of stuff happening. We move to the next page, the new Jim Crow law. So not law, but so what happens now is if you're labeled a felon, even for a minor drug crime, for example, marijuana use or whatever, now you're branded forever. You lost your voting rights, your traveling abroad rights, your right to bear arms, jury service, licenses, employment in a lot of fields, public and social benefits, housing and parental benefits. So once you're labeled a criminal, the war on drugs was in a way a targeting on the men of color. And we know that dispersing drugs in communities happened in a way where I've met people that I will someday, if we personally get to speak together, ask me about it, and I'll explain to you some interesting things that I found out. But African Americans are incarcerated in state prisons at the rate of 5-to-1 and 10-to-1 compared to whites in some states. And the data finds that race and ethnicity of all respondents, African Americans are associated with terms such as dangerous, aggressive, violent, and criminal. Dr. Michelle Alexander wrote The New Jim Crow, which is another great book. So we're moving on. As we move on to the National Optometric Association, back in the 60s, people of color, Dr. Howlett talks about people of color, and also Dr. C. Clayton Powell, the founders, the wonderful founders of the NOA, talk about that people of color had to come in the back door to get an eye exam or wait till the evening time. If you were hired by someone, sometimes if you were a black eye doctor hired by a white eye doctor, you could not see white patients. So, and then during the meetings at the different levels, we were actually not included in some of the levels of the committees, and we couldn't be presidents of our state or whatever. And so there was a lot of things going on that we could not control. Therefore, C. Clayton Powell and Dr. John Howlett formed the National Optometric Association in 1969. If you go to the next slide. So this gave us a voice. So 25 people met in Virginia, and this is a picture of them. And it added this another level that we're actually have a national voice now to be able to talk and expose some of those Jim Crow acts that were troubling Black ODs. Next page, please. 54 years later, we're still breaking barriers. So right now, we have the largest minority or largest national minority organization with an annual service project, which we do free eye exams, and we've served thousands of people in various communities throughout the United States. We promote the 3 Silent Killer program, and we've educated tens of thousands of of high blood pressure, glaucoma, and diabetes. We are close to $1 million in scholarships and travel grants for NOSA students of 1,000 strong right now, or close to 1,000 strong. I think it's 968 or 970 something. We're proud to provide educational opportunities to our young people. And you see in this front row, Dr. C. Clayton Powell and passed, and also our Dr. Ali Poe passed, but we are still carrying and on their shoulders of these great men. If we go to the next page, purpose of the NOA is to educate underrepresented minority communities, to recruit and assist underrepresented minority optometry students, and to provide care to underrepresented minority communities. If you go to the next page, please. So we have an organizational summary, kind of which I talked about already. We've existed since 1969. We've had 27 past presidents, and we're comprised of African American, Latino, Asian American, white. Everyone can come and be a part of the NOA. Nobody is excluded, because we are all originally Africans anyway, if you understand our history. So everyone is involved. Everyone should be evolved to the place to get them involved. So we represent over 600 doctors, and we have a board of directors, executive director, and we develop and implement different programs. Next page, please. So we're concerned about promoting cultural diversity in schools and colleges. We're working on a DEI program that we can actually now yearly promote and bring in different people from all over the United States and offer deans and presidents and staff, and any association is welcome to come to and get credits for DEI, which is wonderful. So we'll do this every year from now on. Education of populations at high risk in eye disease and blindness, and our healthcare policy development. So we want to go to DC this year and actually work with the government to change some of the policies. So we're working with the AOA. That's another thing. I think next page, please. So we have the original past. We created a minority recruitment grant, which bumped the enrollment almost over 10 times the amount. So getting grants and getting monies to actually get into the schools and for us to be present and for us to be able to get our students to come to the conventions, it helps us actually become a family and show that Black love, show that love to people and make sure that they understand that they're welcome. This is a family. This is a fun place to be. And this next convention, I challenge you, it's going to be really cool. So we have our regional trustees, which we've actually now broken into co-trustees because our regions have become so big. We have now 25 schools up to Waterloo, down to all the way down to Southern California, and all the way across to Florida. And so we've created an interaction with colleges in the region, and we've got the NOSA was again with close to 1,000 students. Next page, please. these are the NOA regions. We have 5 different regions that, again, there's a new Utah school now, the Rocky Mountain College of Optometry. And we have, again, the school in Waterloo, which is up in Canada now too. So we have 5 different regions, and we represent, with each region, we have a regional trustee or co-trustee that helps in that region. So if people have questions, we get to go ahead and help them in different regions. Next page, please. The Hall of Fame. So super cool. The AOA has brought in Dr. C. Clayton Powell, our founders, Dr. John Howlett, Dr. Mel Shipp, Dr. Ed Marshall, and just 2 years ago, Dr. Marvin Poston posthumously. So we're very excited to see that National Hall of Fame of Optometry and men of color growing, and men and women of color. There's no women there yet. So let's get the women in there. National Optometric Association Future. The next slide, please. So we are recruiting minorities to optometry. African American, Native American, Latinos, they only account for 2 to 3% of the optometrists in the United States. Working hand in hand also with Black Eye Care Perspective has the 13% challenge, which they are doing a great job with, challenging different institutions as well as groups to bring that number up. So we're working in concert with them and very proud of them. Retention and mentoring efforts are vitally important to students. So anytime you get a child or a person of color in your chair, always talk about optometry and suggest it. We're creating coalitions and our continued education in undeserved populations. We do our screenings and we build allyships. This year, we are meeting with the AOA, and we're inviting other organizations to our convention. And so that'll be very exciting. Next slide, please. This is one of my mentees who just finished. It's so funny because when I was just sitting here, her dad was calling me, who I played football with. He's a track star. He was one of the fastest guys, and she ran track too. But anyway, Dr. Marissa Brown, I mentored her since she was probably about 8 years old, all the way into to becoming an optometrist. So pretty cool seeing the fruits actually become a reality. So moving to the last slide here. So I always like to say from obscurity to brightness, which we move from a place of obscurity where, we're not seen. And now we're standing in a place of brightness where the NOA has put us into a national field, a national area where we can actually be seen and be a part of a lot of the things that are happening and actually have a word in a say in a lot of things, which is a real blessing. So I want to thank the NOF for allowing me to share. And I do have some fun slides if we want to go a little bit farther. So I always think of life as being a fight, like a battle. And so I like fighters. And so I got to meet Mike Tyson and talk to him about his background and kind of find out a little bit about him. I got to meet him in Las Vegas, and he was pretty cool to talk to. Next slide, please. And then I also got to meet Sugar Ray Leonard. And so we were at an event with him and got to hang out. That's my wife, Maxine, there, and Thomas Hitman Hearns next to her. And then George Foreman right here, who I met him in just down the way in an area. He was a really funny guy. And then I also like to add that life should also be fun and we should have joy. So if you know me, I like to have fun. And so the last slide is Sinbad. Oh, no, that's not Sinbad. That's Muhammad Ali and my younger sister, Teresa. So that is, she got to meet him and she told me about that. It was a really neat thing. And if you get a chance, I can tell you a little bit about that in the future. The last slide, I think this is it. So we got to kind of hang out with Sinbad for a second. He's a really, really cool guy. but so funny, obviously, and the clean kind of funny that we like. So anyway, that's it. And no, I wasn't done yet, but thank you. Bless you. I'm all done now. Thank you for your listening to me and being here for Black History Month. And I'm excited.
So, Dr. Jones, as I was sitting back there in the back, Dr. Brown and I were actually texting about how much wisdom you have. We just was like, wow, like so many things that you shared tonight we didn't know. But I think it's important because so many young people today don't know that history. Even the basic history, that we always put out there, a lot of young people don't know it. And so why do you think it's so important at during this day and time, because there's so many inequities, social justice, so much is going on in the Black community? Why is this important for us to know as a body of people who we are and where we're trying to go? Why is this important, everything that you shared tonight?
Well, I think I brought it. Can I take a quick drink of water here?
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of reasons. I think the most important one is, again, history repeats itself. So in the civil rights, where we had the baddest, best, it came out of a Christian culture. We had, the top people leading these marches. And what happens with the insurance companies come up under, they start paying us. We start getting grants. We start getting money. All of this money starts, giving us a sense of peace, which that sense of peace stops us from our movement. So that's what happened in the 60s. I saw it stop. I saw it change. I saw people of color happy because we were making money, and we forgot that how hard we fought 10, 20 years ago. And now it's happening again. We just have Black Lives Matter. We understand what the problem is, but now we're starting to get all these grants. We were promised $50 billion. If you Google $50 billion to Black businesses, Google that, and you'll find out Amazon, Microsoft, they promised this money. So that, to me, when you get that money, are you still who you are? Are you changing? And so we got to look back on that. And then when we understand who we are, we're more powerful.
Wow, you said something so profound. You talked about that when we, and I'm going to use the word, when we have arrived, if I can use that word, we sometimes forget that we still have to fight. No matter how, if there's an old gospel song that says, no matter how high I get, I'll still be looking up to you. And so what I heard for you is that no matter how high we get in our finances, how high we get in our career, it's always important for us to still stay the course and do the work, because there are future generations that are coming behind us, and we must be willing to lay that course for them. That's what I heard. And I think that's so profound, that sometimes we forget about who we are. We forget about the struggle. Wow.
Exactly.
Wow. Yes. I'm just saying wow, because that was so profound. And I hope to our listening audience that they heard exactly what you said. Here you have an optometrist who I will call a history maker, because you are a history maker. So years to come, people will know your name. I just believe that. And so you have a history maker on here tonight talking about the movement, talking about not forgetting who we are, and the importance of participating in the struggle, regardless of where you are in life. It's important for you to participate in the struggle. So we are at the time mark, but thank you so much for the wisdom. What can you tell the listening audience just a few words of encouragement, of hope, or what you will leave your listening audience for this Black History experience, for this Black History moment?
First of all, I want to thank everyone just for being a part of this. It's great. I love history. I love learning about it. I want us to, if we can, get together and talk like a community again, be a part of, that that love and getting together. I spoke about it at our last convention. In my parting words, I think that us loving each other and getting rid of division and putting ourselves together and respecting each other and uplifting each other, those are things that I learned, and those are things that I know part of the implicit bias that's being trained into us is something that we need to worry about ourselves, not worry, but create the knowledge of what it is, reprogram our minds not to be prejudiced against each other or have that implicit bias that is being trained every day into us by the media, by all these different things. So we don't realize it, but if we see in ourselves those things, loving yourself first, I think, and if you know who you are historically, you can love yourself.
Wow. Wow. I'm a history. I love history, especially Black history, African American history, and so I could talk to you all night because you just hit something. You said implicit bias. You talked about prejudice against our own self. So I mean that's a whole dialogue. I'm probably going to be reaching out to you to have you on a different platform because you are saying so much wisdom tonight, and I really hope that our listening audience are really capturing everything that you're saying. That one thing you said was it's time for us to stop hating one another. These implicit bias, all of these things that are causing us to have segregation among ourselves, we need to rid ourselves of those. So Dr. Jones, thank you so very much. You are the history maker of today, so we will look for your name in the history books in 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So thank you for all that you're doing, and thank you for being a trailblazer for us young people as we're trying to maneuver through the system. So thank you so much.
Bless you. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, you have just heard the one and only Dr. E. Larry Jones, optometrist, historian, mover, shaker, and as I say, he is making history today. Again, please go and visit the National Optometric Foundation website as well as our Facebook page. Please subscribe. Let us know. We want to add you to our mailing list. And also, if you're looking to support an organization that is doing great work in the community, we're providing scholarships for young people to become optometrists, doing a lot of community work. So please reach out and you can make a donation to Cash App, $ Protecting the Vision. And I will say this, no donation is too small. If you would like to make $1 donation, that is a donation that will help a young person get to school. It does not matter how small or big your donation is. We're here to help individuals not only see, but be healthy, holistic in their mind, body, spirit, and soul. And also, we would love for you all to come to the convention. The convention for the National Optometric Association will be in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It never rains in that's Southern California. Well, how about we'll just say the sun is always shining in the great state of Florida. If you want to learn more about the convention, you can visit www.nationaloptometricassociation.com. And I can assure you the conventions are amazing. I'm not an optometrist, but guess what? I believe in the health and well-being of individuals. So again, please visit us on our Facebook page, National Optometric Foundation. Please visit our website, nationaloptometricfoundation.com. And please just like and share this information. Let's help someone. And again, let's give Dr. Larry Jones another hand clap, virtual hand clap. Job well done. He made history tonight. Again, thank you. Be blessed. Take care. And continue to celebrate Black History Month. Not only in the month of February, but every day of the year. Because every day of the year is Black History Day. Take care. God bless.